Welcome back, rockers and fellow horse nerds. We're back with Linda Tellington-Jones. We're going to talk about loneliness, tribe, belonging. How do horses bring us back into this? Because we know it can be a fractured world out there in the horse world, but how can it bring us back into heart coherence? And also, can horses bring us back to the human society that we actually need? Stick around, Linda's going to show us how. If you like it, find it good, please thumb up. Please subscribe, please share, help the algorithm, help us to help you to get more of this content. Join button down below, send us a few bucks, help us to make more of this content. All right, let's dive in. All right, so we're back with Linda, and one of the things which we talked about in the last conversation was the need to forgive ourselves for all the stuff we need to forgive ourselves for. So that we can come to horses with the same loving energy and to each other. Because where it seems the world has gone, and it's not just the horse world, increasingly in the last couple of decades, is towards isolation and loneliness. Yep. And how many times have you heard someone say, I hate people, but I love horses? Or I hate people, but I love dogs. And I've always thought, you can't really actually love your horse if that's your attitude, because if you're bringing that bitterness, the horse is going to feel it, and the horse is a herd animal, and humans are herd animals, and the horse riding tradition comes out of humans living in tribes collectively, working with horses that live in tribes collectively, and that transference of love makes the thing that should be impossible, it shouldn't really be possible for us to ride horses at all, you know, given that our balance is wrong, given that we are their predator, yet the miracle happens. But we have to believe in that miraculous thing. So we know that we're dealing in the horse world with factionalism, with people being very negative about each other, and I don't think our horses look at each other that way. You know, when we, if you were to take a horse that is a trail riding or pony trekking horse or something and put it in a stable next to an Olympic dressage horse or an Olympic dog, the Olympic dressage horse doesn't say, I'm an Olympic dressage horse. What are you doing in the stable next to me? It just says, I'm a horse, you're a horse. Let's buddy up, because we're herd animals. They accept each other where they are. We can do the same, because I've been lucky enough to live with hunting and gathering cultures where people do actually relate to each other that way, through conflict resolution, not through conflict creation. But obviously we know that that's not our society. However, we know that horses can also bring that out in us. You have spent a lot of time with modern dressage masters like Rainer Klimke, Klaus Balkenhol, a lot of time at the Spanish Riding School of Vienna. And we know that that sport dressage, that elitism, that old hangover from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, that old hangover from the military, comes with all the dysfunctions that it comes with. We don't need to judge it. We just know that that's the history. But what's interesting to me is that you come in from this very different point of view of heart coherence, unity, and so on. And when you go into those worlds, you seem to swim easily without getting involved in the factionalism. It seems to me that factionalism, that isolation, breeds a kind of loneliness in people that can breed a kind of bitterness that horses can heal, but often doesn't seem to get brought into the light. How is it that you have managed to swim in that world among all that loneliness and isolation and bitterness and be that conflict resolver?
Well, I think, first of all, I was raised by parents who, in my room, there was a hooked sign that said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you."
Yeah.
And I was raised by parents like that, and I think that made a really big difference. I was also raised by a mother in Edmonton, in rural Canada at first, where there was a lot of prejudice against these pea soupers, these people who would come from other parts of the world and speak a different language, speaking French in our area. And my mother always made it a point that we never would be prejudiced against any other people who were different from we are. And Rupert, that's, of course, made a huge difference in my life.
Yeah.
You know, to be that way. But I think I also have had these experiences, and it brings what intrigues me today. I'm spending time in, because I'm not working nearly like I was before. Mm-hmm. And so I have time. So in the morning, I'm always looking for these teachers on, believe it or not, on YouTube. Because we get YouTube with no advertising. And you can get the masters of the world.
Yes, you can.
In any discipline.
Yeah.
It's incredible what's out there. And I happened to run onto Gary Zukav. And I remembered he wrote The Seed of the Soul when it came out in the late 80s. I remember it changing my life, but I didn't remember how. And what he's teaching is what I was getting over all those years. Like in the 80s, I would be just kind of like, I can't remember how it started, but maybe I was writing something and I would be getting these words that would appear to me like, choose cooperation rather than competition. Learn to act rather than react. And this seemed like, I don't know where they came from, but it had a big influence on me. And I remembered them. And it's really funny because I had this discussion with Greg Braden, who's written many, many books, and he's my hero.
Yeah.
And he was,
Greg Braden. Yeah, you should go on YouTube and check out Greg Braden. He's an interesting dude. Yeah.
Right. And his book, for instance, The Spontaneous Healing of Belief, changed my life because I finally remembered that how I had this special connection with horses all those years before. It's like I could understand what they were thinking. It's not that I got words, but I just had a feeling. I knew it. And it's like what Greg Braden talks about is energy. And I have been using energy since a long, long time. And during my Feldenkrais training of 4 years at the Humanistic Psychology Institute, Rupert, we were told, do not use that word in this class, because in the 70s in San Francisco, everybody was doing this and that, whipping off bad energy.
Don't use the word energy.
Don't use the word energy.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's...
And so I didn't for years, and I forgot about it. And then I suddenly realized, when I read Greg Braden, he said, energy is every thought we have, every feeling, every emotion, every belief.
Every protein that makes up our cells, yeah.
Everything is energy.
Yeah, sure.
And then I realized that's how I relate to these horses, and that's how I relate to other people, because I've learned to see the divine in each being. So if I have somebody with whom I do not agree, I can see their self, their soul self, instead of seeing this ego self that they've chosen at this point. And I can appreciate them. And I know that we're all connected and we're all one, whether it's the other person or the horse. So when I look at it from that point of view, I know that I'm bringing a place of harmony on the planet. And this concept of harmony, just from what we think and what we feel, and I can forgive myself for having that feeling of and I can forgive them for whatever they're doing that not in my world. It's not part of love, it's part of fear. And it's just really given me a way to understand myself and how I've managed to kind of weave in these worlds. And the reason I was able to work with Klaus Balkenhol and Dr. Klimke all those years, is the fact that that's the world I came from. That was my interest, was dressage. That was the big thing, because that's where you really have to work at it. Everything else was easy. Jumping or eventing or all the stuff that I did, you don't have the same discipline at all.
No. The discipline, it's so interesting. We've all, I think, who've done that deep dive into the dressage thing, one knows that that discipline can lead to a lot of stress, or it can lead to a lot of joy.
It can.
And so much seems to be about what gets imprinted on you.
I think it has to do with forgiveness.
Okay, talk to us about that.
Yeah, so if your horse does something you don't like, instead of reacting, say, wait a minute, I know this horse is doing the best it can. What do I have to do to make this horse understand what it is that we need in order to do this? And that may be going back to what you're talking about, is basic conditioning. So the horse has the strength to do it, and not, I had the great pleasure of working. I was 10 times in the former Soviet Union working in Moscow as a citizen diplomat. And I got to work with Alana Petrocova, and she won a silver medal in Mexico, where we took my school took a group of people to be in Mexico. And it was just so interesting to watch her training, because her attitude was, you work a horse and work and work and work, and when they're tired, you work them more. That's not my attitude.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense for the body to be pressed to that point, that there's fatigue and no potential for.
Well, that comes out of the military, of saying an elite military unit saying that we only want the people or the horses that can withstand that level of suffering, so that when they go into campaign, they are the ones that will survive and still be able to operate. That's where that mindset comes from. But what's interesting about that is we actually know that it's not as practical as people make that out to be. So the really good cavalry officers, of course, knew how to nurse their horses. And it's really worth a read, guys. Anyone's watching this, read Xenophon. Xenophon is the first book on dressage, really, that comes out of the European tradition. It's actually older than the European tradition dressage. It goes back into Central Asia and so on, but it shows up in Europe around 400, 500 BC or so, and they learn it, the Greeks learn it from the Persians, and Xenophon tells us this. But the book you want to read isn't just his book on horsemanship, it's this thing called Anabasis. And the Anabasis is the journey that he ended up on, because as a young man, he got hired as a mercenary to go and fight for the Persians, the brother of the Persian king, who wanted to try and knock his brother off the throne. And he hired 10,000 Greeks to come and back him up. And
hired them.
He hired them. Yeah, they were mercenaries. And Xenophon was on this. And what's interesting about that is Xenophon was also a philosopher. So he's a student of Socrates. He's mates with Plato. He's known as much as a philosopher as he is a horseman. So if you go to study philosophy at university, they will teach you Xenophon in the same way they'll teach you Plato, right? But all these guys were military men, so including Socrates. Socrates actually rescued Xenophon at a battle with Thebes.
That's interesting.
When Xenophon had fallen from his horse, because Xenophon was a nobleman, he was fighting on horseback, right? So they were friends. Anyway, Xenophon ends up on the wrong side, and they get all the way to about Baghdad, which is Greece, Baghdad. It is about
a long way.
It's a long way. And they walked, right? And then they fight this big battle. Oh dear, we've lost. What happens is their leader gets killed, the brother of the Persian gets killed in the battle, and they have to try and make it home. And they go home. And Xenophon ends up being elected the leader of that 10,000. And he manages to get them back to Greece, and he becomes the master of what's called the tactical withdrawal. And that's taught at West Point now, that's taught at Sandhurst, all those officer training schools. Maybe they even teach it in Russia, I don't know. So he's known for this. But he talks about the fact that you need to be good to your horse, because when you need that horse,
gotta get back home.
So that idea of to punish and push and drive beyond doesn't actually work.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you have all these old masters, they're all philosophers. You know, Pluvinelle in the 17th century goes to the French king and says, we've lost control of our nobility. They just fight civil wars all the time. We need to get control. I suggest we have these equestrian schools because to train horses, you have to be able to master your emotions. If they can master their emotions, for that, we can probably get our economy under, and the king goes for it. So I think you're describing basically a similar process, but just in our time. I know that today's Valentine's Day, and you were telling us just before we turned the camera on that you just got an interesting Valentine. Tell us who you got that Valentine from.
It was so much fun, because I got it from Andrea Hossberger.
So tell us who Andrea Hossberger is.
Andrea Hossberger was for a long time the head rider at the Spanish riding school. And then there was some falling out, and he's now one of the trainers for many of the top dressage people in Germany and Switzerland. And so I met him when I was working with one of the big stables, and we had dinner together after, and he asked me for my autograph, and I couldn't believe it, because I said, come on, I should be asking for your autograph, right? And so then I met him at another place that I work with dressage horses in Germany at the Bitless, and he's there every month, and so we've just really had fun. He's very kind to horses and to riders and to people. Very, I think he's a master for our future. And so I got a Valentine from him today, and with a wonderful, gorgeous picture of a horse in this beautiful surroundings. And it was just really fun, because the last time I was at Megla's, he asked me if he could take a picture with me for Facebook and post it on Facebook. And I just thought that was so much fun. And it's just such an honor to know people like this, and to know, to have worked with Dr. Klimke. And the last time when we did something in Los Angeles, he said, next year we're going to do this again, and we're really going to advertise this because everybody should know your work, Linda. That was a real honor. So, and I have to tell you one thing about another of our modern masters, Klaus Balkenhol. When I went to work with a horse with him he had been sitting with him for months in the stall, just trying to get, every day, not months in the stall. I don't mean that, I mean every day. He would go and sit with the horse, because he was the horse with the most talented payoff that he'd ever had. But the horse was really nervous in competition. And so he would just sit with him and be with him. And that was his idea. And when he saw what I was able to do with just the working on the body and bringing the horse, grounding them, connecting them into the body. Because have you ever been so afraid you're like out of the body? You leave the body.
A few times in my life,
And that's what we do with horses. We just quietly, without pushing them, just give them a sense of non-fear in the body and connection, which is really beautiful. But anyway, if thanks to Klaus Balkenhol, I have to tell you, for any of your readers who are sitting here and are older, Klaus Balkenhol, the last time we were together a couple of years ago at Equestrian, he said, Linda, are you wearing hearing aids? No, I never thought about it. He said, go and get your hearing tested, because it can make a huge difference. And I think he did me a huge favor, because we don't know that. I didn't ever have a hearing problem, except when I was tested, it was a high level that was a problem. But we start to...
It seems that the stories that you're telling are stories of friendship.
Yes.
Right. And we started this conversation talking about loneliness. And it's pretty clear we're in a loneliness epidemic. And horses are lonely because they're often isolated from each other. We're lonely. And then you get a lonely person and a lonely horse coming together to try and achieve what? Joy? Because the only reason why we do anything with horses is to feel good.
It's true.
We do not require them for transportation anymore.
Yep.
And thank God we don't really use them for war anymore. You could perhaps argue in the therapeutic work that we do that it's still very much a working partnership, and there's obviously cowboying still goes on, but we know that's not the majority of the horse world. So the real reason we get with horses is because on an instinctive level we feel it's going to make us feel better. And then here we come lonely, here comes the horse lonely.
Under stress.
And under stress.
Right.
And right. There's the stresses of loneliness and there's the stresses not of loneliness. And we put all those together in a nice big cocktail. I think a lot of people that are watching this conversation, listening to it, probably resonate with that. You've told us about a life of friendship and collaboration, and it seems to me that a spark that goes through it is the spark of curiosity. That you're a curious person who got together with other curious people and explored.
Right.
How do we help somebody? I'm just projecting now. Someone I know, for example, she would be in her mid-30s. She's mid-career. She's a student of mine. She works incredibly hard. She didn't come from money. Now she's made a bit of money, so she has a horse. But she doesn't have a lot of time for the horse because she has to work so hard. And she feels isolated in her stable because she wants to do your kind of work, my kind of work. So she's getting the side eye, she's getting so she's already kind of isolated anyway. And now in the barn that she's in, she's isolated. And I think there's so many people going through this kind of thing. What's your advice to the people who find themselves in this position?
Well, it's funny. The first thing I would do would be to advise her to go out and either go get the book, The Seat of the Soul, which is in German. Well, you're in Germany also, by Gary Zukav.
Okay.
And it will give her a whole other way of being, I believe. And you can go on YouTube and look at these and listen to him today. He wrote it in the late 80s. You can hear a podcast from last week.
Okay.
And this idea of learning to work with our emotions, and that's what we do with horses. When people get upset with their horses or themselves over their horses, it's an emotional thing. But we're told basically is like, don't trust your emotions. And what Gary Zukav is saying with this work is look at those emotions and find a way to transform them into a form of love. And love, talking about appreciation, gratitude, understanding, compassion, forgiveness. And I believe that we can overcome this loneliness by getting to know ourselves and coming to a place of basic love. But from those, not love, the conditional love, but love of the fact that this body, Rupert, we are a collection of infinite possibilities. And the fact that in this body, I mean, I would love to talk to you. It's going to take too long because I want to talk to you about that and seeing our horses with different eyes and ourselves as riders from different eyes. Okay. And I'd like to share that with your readers.
Let's have that for the next conversation. Thank you.
And now we should have dinner.
Okay. All right, rockers, if this was in any way fun, educational, if you liked it, please thumb up, please subscribe, please share. We know that YouTube looks for this stuff to push more of this content forward. If you want to help us make some time to make more of this content, please, you'll see a join button down below. Send us a few bucks. It doesn't take much to help us make more time for this. If you would like to learn how to train your horses in the manner of the old masters, in a way that's good for you and good for your horse, you'll see there's a link down below, heliosharmony.com. Got a free intro course there. And if you want to come and play with us and our lovely ponies, who you've probably seen on some of our training videos, you can do that directly, person to person, person to pony, with us. All you've got to do is go on that website, heliosharmony.com. There's an email link. Shoot us an email there. We'll make a plan. All right, those are the plugs. Rock on.